Welcome back to hour number 2 of the Gary Sutton Show here on a Thursday morning. Our next guest is a guy who is no stranger to our show. He is Joe Sestak. He's a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate, a former 3-star Admiral, served in the Navy for 31 years. He served as a congressman from Pennsylvania's 7th Congressional District from 2007 to 2011. As a congressman, he served in both the Armed Services and Education and Labor Committees and was vice chairman of the Small Business Committee. And according to the Office of the House Historian, Joe is the highest-ranking foreign military officer ever to serve in the United States House of Representatives. As an admiral, he led a series of operational commands at sea, including commander of an aircraft carrier battle group of 30 U.S. and allied ships with over 15,000 sailors on 100 aircraft. He also, after 9/11, was the first director of Deep Blue, the Navy's anti-terrorism unit that established strategic and operations policies for the global war on terrorism. And he served as President Clinton's director of defense policy at the National Security Council in the White House, and also as a deputy chief of naval operations responsible for the development of the Navy's 5-year, $350 billion warfare requirements. He holds a Ph.D. in political economy and government from Harvard University. And with that being said, we welcome Joe Sestak back here on the Gary Sutton Show. Joe, that's the segment. That's it. Nice talking to you. Okay?
But Gary, the one time when you read it before, the thing I most liked what you said the other time was, and he's most proud of being dad.
Yep, and he is most proud of being dad. I know that, and husband. Hey, great to have you back, Joe.
Good to be back, Gary. Thank you.
Happy New Year to you. I know you're out on the road right now. You're on a 7-day plan for restoring the American dream for working families tour, and you are running for Pat Toomey's seat, which is up this year, for Senate. So tell me how the tour has been so far.
It's been great. Actually, it's 2 days, 7 cities.
Right.
So
I said 7 days. I'm sorry, 7 cities, 2 days. Forgive me.
We just left Harrisburg now. We're on our way to Scranton, and we'll hit Bethlehem and Bryn Mawr after that and wrap it up. Yesterday, we were in Pittsburgh, Johnstown, and Erie. And look, we all know we had 2 conservative, 2 liberal think tanks that came together, and they said, guess what? For the very first time, the American dream has had a generation that didn't do better than their parents. We got to get going. And this is where the policies I'm laying out, different ones at each place, are, in my belief, things that we need to go together, Republicans and Democrats, to restore the dream for people of Pennsylvania and America.
Joe, I want to talk about some of those policies this morning with you that you've been using in each of the 7 city stops and some that you're going to be doing here later today. Let's start out with health care and immigration. What's your plan for restoring the American dream in those areas?
Well, look, health care, the Affordable Care Act, far from perfect, but is working. Actually, the health care costs have now decreased from being 6% a year to 3% a year. And yet, we had something in there, let's just take one example, to where businesses say if you hire a 50-person, you've got to give health care. So they begin hiring part-time people to avoid 50 full-time employees.
Right.
How insane. Look, when I voted for that bill the first time in the House, we didn't have that. So take it out. And what it should be is a certain percentage of your payroll goes toward health care, whether you hire a full-time guy or a small-time guy. That's what we have to do. Second thing is, if I just could talk on this one, why the heck is Medicare forbidden to negotiate for best prices with the pharmaceuticals? The VA, if I go to the VA as a vet, they can negotiate for best prices. So can Medicaid. You know, we lose billions a year for that. So those kind of common sense things is, I think, what we have to do.
Let me ask you on Obamacare, because a lot of people are. I was reading a piece this morning I picked up, and I was going through out of the New York Times. It says out-of-pocket costs are overwhelm Obamacare insured on tight budgets, and it's talking about the high deductibles. It's a lot of people right now are finding it to be unaffordable, and I keep on hearing. I saw Valerie Jarrett trot out from the White House the other day and say, "Well, yeah, but 17 million people are covered now." Well, that's all great, but the question I ask at the end: but at what expense to the rest of the population? If it's not good for the whole population, is it necessarily good? A lot of people are finding it to be more unaffordable. I know my own situation. I've been in the hospital twice the last 2 years. That $4,000 is a tough nut to cover each time. So, in other words, first $4,000, I don't really have health care until I get past that $4,000 mark.
Yeah. Now, here's what the New York Times article didn't have. That for the very first time, you can go in and get preventive care benefits, child or adults, for free. That your visit to your general doctors for getting an aneurysm checked out is free. Cholesterol screenings are free. All your immunizations are free. And the doctor visits are free. No copays, no deductibles. They don't have that in there. You can go in and get checked for diabetes, for hepatitis. You can have breast cancer checked for. You can get a mammogram done, all for free. And that's why those are free, and so the cost went up in another area a little bit. But here's also what happened, as you probably saw last week. 12 markets in America, for the very first time, had private companies in Obamacare saying every visit to the general doctor is now free. We want you to come in and no visit just to make sure we can check anything. And so if you feel you got a cold and you're worried it's pneumonia, even though it's not in the Affordable Care Act, you can go in now in 12 healthcare markets and find out that these private companies say, because of what the incentive that's happened with free visits, oh, great, you got pneumonia, we can get the antibiotics in you, and companies are now finding out they're saving more money by having that in. So we are moving down the road. But you're right, it isn't perfect. But right now, we no longer have 165 Pennsylvanians losing their health care every day, which we did have prior to the Affordable Care Act being passed.
You talked about wanting to be able to get better prices on the Medicare market, and why is it that we can't just let the free market work? And have creative destruction, so to speak, by competition? Why is it that we don't work harder to be able to go out and shop for our health care the way we shop for so many other things in this country, including our automobile care, including the other products that we buy? Why is it that we're not smart enough to do that?
Well, it's because, as you see, before the Affordable Care Act was passed, we were having creative destruction, 165 people losing their health care every day. And in fact, the Obamacare was not government run at all. All it did is say, private company, from here on out, if you want to, it wasn't mandated, you can offer your Blue Cross plan on the Affordable Care Act exchange. You don't have to, but you can. But if you do, you have to make sure that you follow certain rules. So, for example, if you get cancer, you can no longer have caps of $100,000, that's all you can spend on cancer on a patient. If you are a woman, you don't have to pay twice as much as a man. If you are a child, you can stay on your parents' health care plan to 26. And if you had brain cancer once in your life, you are now no longer deemed a pre-existing condition. Those are the rules. It didn't say at all, this is going to be government run. It merely said, if you want to put your health care plan up there, and in fact, it was so good at making the free market work more fairly, is what happened is last year, 25% increase of health insurance companies said, boy, we missed out on a lot of free patients here that are going to other companies. And because 25% increase of insurance companies said, I now want to offer my plan, the premiums right now on the Affordable Care Act are less than those provided outside the Affordable Care Act by companies. They are actually less.
And yet, we see stories that United Healthcare, for example, is thinking about not continuing. We see, again, not enough people coming in on the front end to take care of the people on the back end. That's one of the stories that we read out there as well. So, as you take into consideration the healthcare, how do you factor that in?
Yeah, United Healthcare, let's take that one. I saw their statement that they're thinking of withdrawing, and yet, Guess what I noticed? Those 12 markets I told you where healthcare companies are offering free visits, United, one of the subsidiaries of United Healthcare, is actually one of them. So they seem to be talking out of one side of their mouth, and yet on the other side, they're in the Affordable Care Act, and now they're finding out that the private market has been made to work so well by the Affordable Care Act that now they're offering free visits to all the doctors under their subsidiary there to come on in, because they actually found out, as the plan said, is, boy, this idea of having free visits is good because we pay less as an insurance company because we get them in early to find out their pneumonia and can take care of them. So I think, as you can see, United Healthcare has decided to stay in.
There are a lot of people. I was talking to a guy this morning who owns a small company. He said, it has been a real hurt on companies like his. And of course, we see current events today. We just had the House reject Obamacare yesterday and finally send it to the president. First time he's going to have to actually step up and veto it. So you wonder, why is it that they're still so opposed to it if it's so good?
Yeah. Look, this is a very good point by you, Gary. This is probably, I think, the one area where we set up, the Affordable Care Act set up what was called SHOP programs for small businesses, where small businesses would now be allowed to come together as a bunch of small businesses could join together to negotiate in these exchanges with, let's say, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they'd have more heft. It's sort of like Walmart, when it negotiates with somebody, it has a lot of buying power to negotiate lower prices. And so we set those separate exchanges up. They haven't worked quite as well as we'd like. Those who are in the shop exchanges pay 4% less on their premiums than those that are outside the shop exchanges, but it hasn't gone to as well as it had to. Now, all that said, before the Affordable Care Act, we had sort of like in the previous decade, approximately, and Gary, don't hold me to this one figure, but I'll get it over to you, 20% small businesses had dropped their health care plans because they couldn't afford it before the Affordable Care Act. Now, we've decreased those premiums about 4%, but that has not meant we've bent the health care curve, and we've got to do better than that by letting them come together more easily to negotiate as small businesses, not one-on-one, but as big groups that can then negotiate as all the, let's just say all the, shoe stores can come together and negotiate best price.
Joe, I don't want to stay just on that this morning because we have a lot of things to hit, but in just a few minutes to do it. But immigration, a lot of people here are talking about immigration. Obviously, it's been out there on the campaign trail big this year. What are your thoughts about immigration in terms of making it better for Pennsylvania families?
Yeah, see, I thought Governor Romney had it absolutely right when he was campaigning for the presidency and said, look, we should staple the green card to the diploma for those who have advanced degrees and are here getting it. And that's because between now and 2022, we're going to need 11.4 million more workers, half of which have to have advanced degree. For every job that is advertised for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, for every 2 jobs that are advertised today, there's only 1 qualified applicant. And so what I talked about yesterday is, hey, how do we make sure that we're getting, it isn't just like 2/3 of immigrants tend to be some family related. How do we change that so as the immediate family, but how do we make sure it's the brains, the best that we get to be able to be our immigrants? And so, for example, when I did this event, I did it for someone with a PhD, was an immigrant yesterday in Johnstown, who was in one business that created 100 jobs and now has another business already that started to create 7 jobs. And so that's the kind of approach we have to have.
Well, the biggest thing that people are concerned about this year, and obviously you're a guy that's been involved with the terrorism issue, and that's become combined now with immigration. As we look at what happened in San Bernardino, we look at what happened in Paris, we look at the Syrian refugees coming in, and people are saying, well, we got to bring them in, we're checking and we're doing all this. But Americans do not trust our institutions right now, and they definitely, many do not trust this president and where his administration has gone. And we look at the chaos all over the world, and a lot of people are saying, wait a second, you've told us all these things that are safe before, and yet you've opened up our borders. We got people coming across there like crazy. We had kids being shipped out all over the place the last couple of years because of the DACA rule. You got an executive order out there now that's being held up by a court. We're not quite so sure that we believe you on immigration right now. How do you help to go about correcting that, Joe?
Well, first off, I think immigration, much like my father who immigrated from Czechoslovakia, really renews us every year. All of us are immigrants of some kind, almost, except for the Indians that were here initially. Now, number 2, so I'm a believer it helps. It's very good for us. But you have 3 good points here. First off, you are absolutely right. Do we have to secure our borders? Yes, and not just for immigration, but because I knew when I headed the Navy Anti-Terrorism Unit that Al-Qaeda was involved in the drug trade act there. Our borders need to be absolutely 100% secure for the reasons that, yes, you brought up, but also for many other reasons. And we haven't done the job that needs to be done on that. Number 2, I think that this easy flow in here by other means is absolutely not even understandable. Let me give you an example. Right now, there's something like, I'm going to be slightly off on the numbers, but there's over a score of countries where those 7 people who blew up were terrorists there in Paris. All of them were citizens, those 7 of them, of Europe, of someplace in Europe. They could have gotten on visa-free on a flight that day and flown here to America. Why the heck do we have that system?
Well, and the fact is that our illegal immigration in this country, 2/3 of it comes from overstaying visas and visas that are abused. I mean, you look at what happened with 9/11. You got terrorists coming in there. Every single one of them abused a visa to be able to get here and kind of plant themselves here and then be ready to pull off what happened on 9/11.
Absolutely. Look, and so, the laws should be followed, and you shouldn't have these visa-free people just coming in. I'm sorry, however that program was set up, I believe was set up some decade or two ago. We don't, we have to fix that. But third is, let's go back to where you started from, because it is a legitimate concern. I think this issue of people emigrating here, we have to keep the perspective in mind. I'm talking right now, go back to the Syrian one. That is an issue, because you know me, I like to talk about the tough ones, here's how I feel about it. Not one of them should ever step foot into this country until they've gone through an 18 to 24-month review process, which they do. In fact, they even have pictures taken of their eyeballs and fingerprints and all, and they are all investigated and all that. But then there's an additional classified program for those from Syria that is even above that. So not one of them has, nor should they, step into this country till they've gone through this almost 2-year process before we then permit them to come in. And to my mind that's the correct way to do it. And so I just do step back, and I know this, that 40% of all Fortune 500 companies are headed by someone who immigrated here or someone who's first generation.
You and I will never have an argument on that. I mean, we are a nation of immigrants. We are made up of immigrants, and also be very proud of our heritage. So it's never about that with me. I guess what it's about is, number one, not number one, I'll just give you my thought, that it tied into immigration, if you are coming to this country, it ought to benefit not only you, but also the country and the population as a whole. And what's happened is many people have felt the way it's been conducted so far is the population has been undercut. And you're a guy talking about being out there and helping to restore the American dream for working families. And yet, legal immigration, we need to have some kind of limit as well. We are not a refugee camp. We are a country that wants to provide the way to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all, an equal one, not create some kind of sub-slavery system that it seems like we're doing in many, many cases with the unskilled labor that we're allowing to come into this country. Yeah.
Look, I come from a congressional district where Upper Darby, a high school, is one place of several across the country where some of these I'm going to pick out a piece of what you said. Some of those who come for humanitarian refugee purposes are go. It has like 42 different languages spoken there. It's actually a marvelous school, and I think that when I look at our interests, the number ones that we have is our vital interest. And I did this when I was President Clinton. I worked on the Defense Council, and I was National Security Council, had to oversee the National Security Strategic Engagement. And I ensured that within there, with others, that we defined our interest in 3 ways. One, vital. We will do anything like World War II to make sure that we take down anyone who threatens us. Important interest. Those are things like Bosnia. It didn't immediately affect us, but gosh darn it, over time, if you just let it peter away there, that conflict there, it changes the character of Europe to where it impedes our prosperity, impedes our interest. And then there's humanitarian interest. And I do think, having gone around this world, that we are most respected for our ideals. And so having a humanitarian program for a certain limited amount of people, and only I think so far less than 2,000 people have ever come here from Syria
like
over the last couple of years.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I think that is just one of the things that America stands for, but they have to be properly screened. And this whole issue of immigration, I'm glad you brought it up, because, look, we all know that we also have to deal with, this issue of the undocumented, the illegal, whatever your term of reference is, right. And we have to do that. I am a believer that John McCain had it right and George Bush had it right when they tried to do a principled compromise, because practically I just feel you're not going to find them. And yet every study is showing, if the immigrants, if they give $23,000, they would, out of the shadows, give $23,000 on average of benefits, of revenues, with about $2,300 in benefits going to them. And to me, let's just deal with this, be willing to take the heat, put it behind us, secure the borders tight as hell. So I'm sorry for saying that. Tight as a lock.
Well, tight as hell's okay. You're fine.
Okay, and then let's deal with this threat of ISIS, because my gosh, eventually, if that half the population of Syria has been killed, maimed, or dislocated, and what after we take down ISIS, what's going to happen afterwards, because we don't want to go back
exactly.
over there.
Yeah, and that's
that's the real issue.
You got it. That's another whole step, and you're right. But the immediate thing is to take out ISIS as it is. Joe, I know we're out of time, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're on a busy tour here. Where's your next stop today?
Scranton. We're headed right up there now. I'm going to be talking about education, and it's not just education for going to college, because the government's going to make $129 billion because it's got the wrong interest rate on the student loans if we don't change that. And number two is it's about the artisans, those I had in the Navy, the plumbers. How do we get those kind of high-skill artisans that do the welding, et cetera? Because manufacturing is about to come back from China.
Yeah, manufacturing workforce. And I saw the manufacturing index is down right now, the worst since like 2009. But I'll leave you with something, my friend, that I always say to everybody who's running. I said, if you go there with the idea of whatever you do, whatever bill you put your name to or you sign, make sure it gives Americans more liberty and more freedom. And if it doesn't do that, don't sign it.
Got it, Gary.
And more safety as well, I think, is a big thing, too. And, I think Americans, one of the things, too, in restoring prosperity, want to get government off their back. So the less government that we have to have involved, the better off I think we'll be in the long run. But always appreciate your thoughts, Joe. Safe travels out there. We'll talk again very soon.
Got it, Gary. Have a great day.
Take care. Thank you. Happy New Year to you. Bye-bye. Joe Sestak with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. You can agree, disagree, but I like to get different kinds of views on here. He is running against Pat Toomey. And, of course, we had Pat Toomey on earlier this week in his role as the president's senator here in the state of Pennsylvania.